We already know that we are going to need two codes to represent this categorical variable that has three levels, three departments. So we are going to use a procedure called dummy coding to actually create these codes. So we use dummy coding when we want to compare one group against all of the other groups. And we are going to make that comparison group the reference group. So we are going to designate one of the groups to be the reference group. There are some notes at the bottom of the slide just to let you know what is appropriate for a reference group and what isn't. So a reference group can be a control group. So maybe it is, if you have an intervention group, a couple of intervention groups, for example, and then a control group, you could use the control group as the reference group and compare that group to the two kinds of therapy, for example, that you're using, or the two types of training. So that's one way to designate. But more often than not, this is just going to be an example like we have here, where you have three departments or three organizations or three teams of people, and you are simply going to arbitrarily decide which one you want to compare to the others. So if you have no other criteria that you're looking for to think about which one will be the reference group, you can just simply pick one and make sure that it is a well-defined group. So it's not an other option or an NA option on a survey. For example, when you're asking people's ethnicity, you have four groups. I hate these kinds of questions, by the way, but unfortunately they're still ubiquitous in research. But we would ask, what is your, ethnic background? Is it this, 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 or this, and then other, please indicate. So if you had the other, please indicate, or an NA option, you would not want to use that particular option as the reference group. You want a well-defined group that has a healthy N size in that group. Okay, so I have decided that for my purposes as the researcher, I've arbitrarily said that business is going to be my reference group. So maybe I'm just trying to think like a hypothetical for this. Maybe you believe that the business school has a higher salary than the rest, and that is why people are kind of thinking that this is a little unfair. Maybe the faculty members are talking amongst themselves in these three departments, and they're like, well, the business folks are paid a little bit more than they should be. Okay, so I am simply making up a story to make this, hopefully this example more interesting and relevant. Okay, so we're going to make the codes now. So we have the two codes, as you can see at the top right of the slide. We have the family studies group, and we're going to create zeros and ones for two coded variables. So for family studies, we're going to make that a 1 on code 1 and a 0 on code 2. So basically what code 1 is, it represents the family studies group, because there's a 1 for family studies, and then all the other departments are designated as 0 for code 1. So that's how we're going to do that. Coded variable number 1 is going to represent family studies, and thus family studies gets a 1 and the other departments get a 0. For biology, they're going to be represented by code 2. So biology is going to get a 1 for code 2, and then the other departments are going to get a 0 for that one. And finally, business is designated as our reference group, and that is going to receive all zeros across both codes. So always, the reference group is given zeros across the two coded variables. Okay, so we have our two codes. We've created them. And these two codes, when you put them in the regression equation, are going to fully represent this categorical variable of three levels or groups. So our regression or numerator DF in this case is going to be the number of codes, which is 2, or lowercase n minus 1. And that is exactly the same in ANOVA, if you'll recall. The numerator DF is the number of groups in that categorical variable minus 1. So in this case, it's 3 minus 1, which is 2. So 2 would be our DF. Now, if we're going to add predictors into our model as covariates, we would add those into the K as well. But if we're just regressing a salary on these 3 departments, then it would be a numerator DF or K of 2.